Love and light, ladies. This is Love, also known as the Self Love Guru. I wanted to make this video about how to start your own podcast because a lot of people are looking for new and creative ways to put information out there. And some of you don't feel comfortable being on camera. I love being in front of the camera. I'm like such an attention whore when it comes to cameras. I like taking pictures, but the most important thing is that I love being on video in general and public speaking. Like that's where I thrive. I like public speaking, I like teaching. I'm actually considering becoming a professor in the near future, so stay tuned as you might see Dr. Love at a college near you. But at any rate, I digress. I wanted to talk about this because I think it's important to acknowledge not only the fact that we are expanding in this digital world, but also the perks that can come with having a podcast. So you can always promote people's businesses. Of course, once you get up to a comfortable following where people are not only listening to you, but they will follow instructions from you, like when you ask them to do things and have sort of that call to action. And then also, once you get solidified in exactly what you're talking about, because you want whatever you sell to fit into your brand's messaging. So, for instance, if you are a health food person who talks about how to meal prep and the importance of exercise and getting adequate sleep, and like how your gut receptors affect your brain and your emotions, you don't want to start selling products for McDonald's. Like when they drop the new quarter pounder with barbecue sauce, you don't want to be the spokesperson for that, right? Spurks. But you don't want to be the spokesperson for that. Or, if someone has an opposing gym that and you don't like their practices, you don't want to support that either. So you have to be very strategic about the projects that you take on and the products that you choose to represent, but it's always an option. In addition to that, different platforms online have it where in your podcast you can put ads in there for different companies, and sometimes they can be random. You can choose to put it at random. Other times they'll ask you, like, what companies would you like to be promoted, which I think is the best thing for you to do is figure out what companies fit into your brand, something that you can support personally because it's a reflection of you. And so, just a little bit of background. I'll start off with how I started my podcast. I have 3 seasons so far of hanging out with Love, and it was so fun, like, especially season one. I remember my very first episode, I interviewed a lady named Andita Dadsey, and I actually found her online. She lived in North Carolina, which is where I am from and where I reside, but she didn't live in my city. She lived in like a neighboring city. And so I'm like, well, choose your favorite restaurant. I want to talk to you about your credit repair business. And, my basic premise for my page was about self love, but part of that was financial wellness. Um, and so I wanted to talk to people about financial wellness and let them know how important it is to have good credit and to be debt free and to be mindful of their spending, right? So that was the premise of that first episode. So she picked her favorite restaurant and we met. It was gorgeous outside. We actually sat outside and ate. Of course, I paid for her lunch. And we went to this Mexican restaurant with some delicious frozen margaritas. They had mango, they had the regular lime. If I'm not mistaken, they had strawberry. I don't think I had that one, but they did have strawberry. So I had the mango and I had the lime, and it was really good. And the drinks were strong. And then, of course, we had the chips and salsa, and the chips were nice and hot. And I don't remember what I had for lunch, but whatever it was good. And I had queso, and we just vibed. We talked for over an hour, but the podcast episode, I believe, was a little over an hour. And so from that conversation, it just sparked so much because we originally started talking about credit, but then we always go into other things. And so it is something to be mindful of. Like, know that you're not going to stick to one topic, but it's also very rewarding because I learned so much from the people that I interview. And I've interviewed a lot of people, and I typically choose people with like a certain career or a certain insight that I want to hear, but we always end up going a little bit deeper because humans are multifaceted. Like, so when I've been interviewed, a lot of people want to either talk to me about business or mental health, right? Because that's what I do. I'm a businesswoman and I'm also a clinician. However, when they start talking to me, we might start talking about families, we might start talking about credit, we might start talking about how to become debt free, we might start talking about, how I used to shop in order to feel better about things. Like, I literally, retail therapy was my thing. And this is how I'm so passionate and why I'm so passionate about marrying financial wellness along with mental health, because they go hand in hand. Like, if I'm stressed out and I have $500 in my account, I'm about to blow some money. If I'm stressed out and I have $100 in my account, I'm about to take my credit card and I'm going to blow somebody else's money and then have to pay that back. And what I noticed that I was doing was I was escaping. That was sort of like, okay, I get a release from spending the money, but then there's another release that I get because now that I've spent this money, I have to go back and earn more so that I can go pay this off. And that allows me to be a workaholic because now I have a reason to go back to work so that I can pay this off, right? And it was so crazy. And I just noticed that, like, when you have a podcast, you can't put yourself in a box. You have to be able to be open, and you got to be able to talk to, because you have to hold that conversation. It's just like people on radio. You may not do a lot of self disclosure, but you do have to be able to have enough where you're able to keep that person engaged and keep them wanting to talk to you, and not being judgmental of them or being rude or catching them off guard. Like, make your podcast organic, make it something that people can feel. So without further ado, my podcast is on Anchor. You can set one up for free there. You can also listen to my podcast on Apple Podcasts as well, Spotify. There's a bunch of different ways to listen to it depending on what app you have. But Anchor is where I started it. And so me just posting to that one platform allows people to stream it on other platforms. I've never tried to listen to it on another platform, so I don't know how that works, but I do have the Anchor app, and that is typically where I record things, or for the most part, you can record using a different device and then just upload it to that app. So, yeah, that's how I got started. So you can go to anchor.fm.com and set up your podcast, or you can go to the Google Podcast link or wherever you feel like you want to host yours. I don't know of any, but I'm pretty sure there are platforms where they put out a certain type of content. And so if you have a niche, I encourage you to look into that to determine where you would like to host your podcast. So if you say, I don't know if this is true or not, but if you say, oh, on Spotify, they talk a lot about music and they talk a lot about financial wellness or financial services. If that's the case, then people are going to go there to hear podcasts about music and financial services, right? So you may want your podcast to be on that platform. So that's how I want you to think about it. You can literally do a Google search and type in what platform hosts the most podcasters, or what platform has the most podcasts about whatever the topic is, and then figure out where you fit in. Or if you're like, I don't want to be on a area that's sort of saturated with these individuals, then maybe, you want to branch out and go to another one. I don't know. It's based on whatever your personal goals are. But I love my podcast. I am definitely ready to do season 4 this year. I'm not exactly sure how I want to structure it this time, but it will be heavily centered around women this time, and moms, and reproductive health, and things that we have to be talking about and changing the narrative about in our communities, because things are getting really crazy. And I don't even want to mention this bill, even though I'm mentioning it now. I'm not going to go into it because it pains me. It really does. Um, but I will say, if people aren't having these conversations, then young women are not aware. And when young women are not aware, we make poor decisions. And so people just have to know what they're getting themselves into. And what better way than for you to have a podcast and for you to promote it so that people can listen to it, right? So talk about what you're passionate about. Don't be afraid. Use your mouthpiece. Definitely be mindful. Now, I say don't be afraid, but definitely be mindful, because if you have, a certain job where you can't talk about certain topics, or, you're heavily into politics and you want to get into that area, you do have to be mindful of the things that you put out into cyberspace, because it could come out to bite you, right? So that's why everything that I say, I stand on it, period. Like, I said that, and that is where I was at that time, and it is what it is, right? And I've evolved a lot. Like, some of the things that I've said before, I can't honestly say that I regret anything or take anything back. I can't honestly say I've looked back at a video and said something that I did not mean or that doesn't still resonate with me, because I give advice about things that are related to life and practices and things of that nature. Um, I'm just checking my email because my phone has been dead for like, I don't know how long. And I'm constantly checking email throughout the day. That's just my thing. But anywho, I hope you all are doing well. I hope that this helped you find out like where you could host it, what you want to do, things of that nature, and gave you a little bit of insight as to why I started mine. Again, it was all about self-love, awareness, just getting to know people and having real conversations. And people love the podcast for that reason. Like, they're like, this is dope. You have some really good content up here. So just keep that in mind. What kind of vibe and what kind of messaging do you want people to take away from the information that you're offering? And thanks for the thumbs up. You're so sweet. All right, y'all. Peace.